Okay, next, can the executive get a motion for items, I guess we can take S and T together. They go together as far as the Mental Health Board. Mr. Thorsland.
With pleasure. S, reconsideration and adoption of resolution number 2021-207, approving budget amendment 21-00038, Fund 840, American Rescue Plan Act, Department 906, Community Services. Increased appropriations, $770,436, increased revenue, 0. Reason, ARPA funding to Mental Health Board for programs 7/1/21 through 6/30/22, see attached memo. T, reconsideration and adoption of resolution number 2021-208, approving budget amendment 21-00039, Fund 090, Mental Health, Department 053, Mental Health Board, increased appropriations $38,385,218, increased revenue $770,436. Reason, this ARPA funding will be utilized by the CCMHB to expand grant funding for local agencies providing mental health and substance abuse treatment services to individuals and families in Champaign County. This expanded grant funding will allow local agencies to continue to strive to meet the growing need for these services in Champaign County. The CCMHB grant year runs from July 1st through June 30th in order to provide consistent, uninterrupted grant funding for these local agencies through the entirety of the upcoming grant year. 50% of the ARPA funding will be utilized from July 1st through December 31st of FY21. The remaining 50% of ARPA funds will be utilized from January 1st through June 30th of FY22.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Taylor, thank you. Any discussion on this item?
Darlene?
Mr. Goss.
Oh. Go ahead, Dar.
Mr. Goss, you have the floor.
I'll secede, Mr. Harper.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to make an amendment to this motion. I move to amend to require all unused ARPA funds on 6/30/2022 be returned to the ARPA fund to be reevaluated and redistributed and not go into a line item budget. Thank you.
And I will accept that amendment.
Second that.
Mr. Thorsland, you'll accept the amendment? Okay, thank you. Mr. Patterson?
I just wanted to ask Lynn if she could kind of discuss how this might affect, because I think that's likely the common practice. But as far as the timing, just to make sure the language doesn't mix things up, because I know that you guys work on a reimbursement basis when you're funding your grants. So can you explain, will this language do what it's trying to achieve?
That is what we do. We call it excess revenue. It's exactly what you're talking about. But the timing is an issue, so you should know only one of those contracts would return funds within 2022, and that's the Regional Planning Commission. Because they will owe us a fourth quarter financial report on August 27 of 2022. And then after we process that, that's how we'll identify what is owed back. So that would be returned to the ARPA fund immediately. But the rest we wait for independent CPA audits and financial reviews to verify those fourth quarter reports, because sometimes they're in error and the amount owed back is different. And we wait for the independent CPA reports because we trust that more, and those are not due until the end of 2020. So that money would be returned in early 2023. So I think it's really important that you understand the timing. This is normal. It's unfortunately normal because it reflects the inability of some of these programs to hire people. It's not very different from what's happening with the sheriff's office and the jail. This is really difficult work, and people don't want to do it anymore. So you would absolutely expect money to come back, but it would come back a little later.
So I think of the language, you might have said spent by 6/30, but I think it might make sense to say expense to programs that were performed no later than 6:30. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's right, Kyle, yeah. I'm sitting here trying to run my numbers
I think
here.
what Lynn is saying is that they have a fiscal year that runs from June to July, or July to June, but they need a little bit longer, a few months longer to get the reports back for that time period. So they know that the numbers are accurate. Is that correct?
Okay, I'd agree to that, yes.
Okay, so the amendment should read for expenses between that time period. Okay. Jacob?
What, you can say, answer from there. What was the amount of funding have First Followers has received to date on your yearly budgets?
They've received, for a couple of years, they were getting 95,000 for the reentry program, and then during COVID, they had to reduce the capacity, but they've brought it back up. And so that one, we didn't fund that this year because we need additional funding to do it, but they're back and running with that. The other program for 39.5 is a new program, and they've only received that for 1 year. So this would be the second year. I think that's right. Second or third year. Time
And
is, I'm sorry,
All
time
good.
is.
And if, just looking at the list, I see a lot of, programs that need funding. You really think 35% of this budget request really should go to the reentry when the list that you think that money couldn't be spent better anywhere else?
We're spending everything else that we could, in fact, using some fund balance to afford to pay for some of the other programs, which are in the final column. So I mean, there is a lot of need, and, there are every provider has problems, and people don't always connect with the large providers, so some of the smaller agencies turn out to be a good answer, and that's why there are so many small providers that.
I
I'm sorry.
understand the vastness of what you guys have to do and how hard that job is. I just see that, there's rape advocacy, homeless shelters, a lot of places that could use $135,000, to me, more than people who have caused people more damage than $135,000.
Ms. Straub?
In my day job, I work with folks who are struggling economically, and oftentimes there are folks who are coming out of, prison or out of jail situations, which causes undue economic strain. And we expect those folks to come out into our communities and be healthy and contribute. And in order to do that, oftentimes they need resources. Sometimes giving folks information about First Followers is the best thing I do all day long. So I would encourage anybody doubting the value that they have to our county to really think about what they hope to see from the folks coming out of jail.
Ms. Carter?
And just like we're visiting the county jail, I would like for some of you to go and visit some of these non-for-profit organizations and actually see the work that they do in our community. First Follower has been a part of this community for many years. I have watched and seen the success story, and whatever percentage they need, I would definitely vote, because they are definitely doing the footwork that needs to be done in order for people to have a prosperous life after incarceration.
Ms. Lakshin?
I just wanted to make sure we highlight again, we listened to Carrie from the Champaign County Jails earlier talking about people who don't belong in the jail system, but are there for mental health issues. I really think we have the chance to address this issue tonight with this revisit of this topic, and I hope that we can divert some people from jails through mental health treatment with this money that we would vote for tonight. Thank you.
Ms. Furtado?
I just have a more technical question. I just want to make sure we have the amendment down. Matt, could you read back what you have as the amendment? I just want to make sure it reflects what Stan wants it to be.
I have it that all unused ARPA funds present on 6/30/2022 will be returned to the ARPA fund, the broad ARPA fund. Is that correct?
Is that right? Is that right? Okay.
With that reminder, I'm okay to save my comment.
Ms. Carter, did you want to say one more thing?
And the report would be available for the return funds by August 2022, right? Or no?
No.
The only one that would be available is for the Regional Planning Commission,
Okay.
and that would be August 27, 2022, and that's if they get the report done on time. So early September is when we would say, this is how much is owed back. And then all of the rest would owe us an independent CPA audit or financial review by the end of 2022. So that money, at the earliest, would be collected in January of 2023. So maybe you're looking for any unused funds associated with this ARPA funding during this contract year should be returned to the ARPA fund. And, because it does kind of come in dribs and drabs, but it does, I agree, like, it belongs back with this fund if it's not used. I mean, does that make sense to say something like associated with this contract year?
Yeah, that's probably a better way to word it, is the funds associated with the contract year from July to June. Ms. Michaels?
Yes, ma'am. I think maybe to clarify some of the confusion is the amendment is about making sure the money is spent, not necessarily that you have the report that said what was and wasn't spent. So as long as you had it spent by June 30th, you were good, and then you prove that by your documentation after the fact.
Mr. Patterson?
And I guess to just clarify again, from a technical standpoint, a lot of, for most of the grants, when they perform this service, it's reimbursed, so it would come after, even the payouts would come after June 30th. That,
No, it's that they're paid first and then it's reconciled.
okay,
But it is reconciled, and most of the agencies tell us what they think is owed back. So we do like to wait for the independent verification.
okay, thank you.
How about this?
Mr. Humphrey?
First, I'd like to thank those who were involved in getting this back in front of us. When this happened last time, it was devastating. I lost sleep over it. I was very bloviating online, and I apologize to anyone that I was bloviating towards. But this was just so important to me because it impacts everything that I do, everything that I care about. But this money right here makes a difference. Even though it seems like it can be a drop of water in the bucket, that drop saves lives. It really does. And I would encourage anybody who can take the chance to go to a First Followers graduation ceremony when they do those. I did that way back when I first came back into town, and I was just helping out around, and it was transformative for me to see people who I would have normally in my prior lives disregarded and thrown away, seeing them overjoyed, holding hands, hugging each other, moving forward with their lives after a time in our jail system and saying, we're going to make it, we're going to move forward. That's the goal of any county jail system, is to have that moment. And this money helps facilitate moments like that. It helps facilitate recovery moments. It helps facilitate life-saving moments. So voting on this and making this a strong priority for us absolutely is the right thing to do, and it absolutely saves lives. So thank you.
Mr. Thorsland?
I think to clarify the Stan's amendment and listening to Lynn, and I think Diane is someone who would be able to help me with this, that amendment should say that the funds after reconciliation not spent in 2022 by June 30, I guess it is, be returned to the ARPA fund. in some way that we know it's after this reconciliation has taken place. So we know we're getting what we need back corrected. We just went through the county audit. We know it's very important to make sure the numbers are right. So I'd like the amendment to say that this is after the reconciliation, so that benefits both sides the best.
Is that okay with
Diane,
you,
help me
Stan?
out here.
I have some language that says that.
I'd agree to that, Eric.
Okay. Matt, do you want to read the amendment again one more time? Do you have all that down?
I've got an idea. All unused fiscal year July 2021 to June 30th, 2022, unused mental health board ARPA funds following reconciliation will be returned to the general Broward County ARPA fund.
That does it?
All right, are we ready to vote on this, or is there more discussion? Okay, no, the amendment was incorporated into the amendment was incorporated into the original, which means we're voting on the two amendments, or the two budget resolutions, number S and number T. This will require 15 votes. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Passalacqua,
Yes.
Paul,
No.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Storr,
Yes.
Straub,
Yes.
Summers,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Thorsland,
Yes.
Ammons,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Cowart,
Yes.
Esri,
No.
Furtado,
Yes.
Goss,
No.
Harper,
Yes.
Humphrey,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Lakshin,
Yes.
Michaels,
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes.
Motion carries. Okay, we're done with our voting items, our action items. Tonight, we're moving on to discussion information items. There is no update from the treasurer or the auditor, although they're, I believe the auditor's here tonight, but they will have a joint resolution or memo for you at the next meeting. Did you want to say anything else, George? Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Next is the introduction of the ARPA project manager. I would like to introduce Kathy Larson to you. Kathy is working for me up to 3 days a week now to manage our ARPA projects. She has a fiscal specialist that'll be working with us also up to 1 day a week as we need them. And she's gotten up to speed about the ARPA requirements, and sort of we're beginning to think about reporting and things like that. So this is Kathy. Kathy has 12 years of experience with the Regional Planning Commission. She and I worked together back when I was at the Regional Planning Commission. She's a great grant manager. She's got economic development experience. She's really good with organizing community projects and getting partners to the table. And she will be helping some of our partners maybe look for additional grant money or find other leverage money for us as we go through this process. So Kathy, do you want to talk a little bit about what you'll be doing?
Yeah, so I've been working with Darlene to get up to speed on a lot of the requests that have come in so far. And I'll be the contact person for requests and questions and clarifications for the rules and regulations for this program. So I'm working on building that list from what Darlene's already started of those requests. And I'll provide regular updates on the status. The interim rule is still the interim rule, so we're waiting on the final approved rule, and then the reporting requirements, which I will also be coordinating for the reporting aspects as well.
Does anybody want to ask Kathy anything while she's here? Just getting started. So she has the long list, the long spreadsheet that I've given you guys, divided into the sections of what we think might be eligible for ARPA funding. She's going to go through those first project by project and sort of reassess those and make sure that they be eligible if we bring them back to the board for consideration. And then, as you know, we keep getting additional requests every day, so she's going to keep the list up to date with the things that we're getting requests for. And also then keeping track of the things that we have agreed to commit the funding to, so that we know when we're out of money. And she'll work with our sub-grantees, like Lynn, for example, to know what kind of reporting is due back to us, because all of our sub-grants will need to report back to us for reporting for our grant itself to the Treasury. So that's where we're at. Thanks for coming tonight, Kathy. I'm sorry, Ms. Carter, did you have a question?
I just wanted to say that I've witnessed Mrs. Kathy Larson's professionalism. I received my first loan through the RPC SBA loan program about 15 years ago. So she was definitely on it, and I appreciate being able to work with you during this project.
Thank you, Samantha.
Mr. Thorson?
I'll let Lorraine get that. Well, I was going to bust Chris Storr on that tonight, but it looks like it's Lorraine. So. Kathy and Darlene, maybe a question for you. Are you, I hate to book you in advance, but will you be available for the board meetings to keep us up to date every month on where we are? We're all waiting to see what the final list of approved things is, what the final rules are. And I think given your expertise, you're probably the best person to explain that to the 22 of us going forward. And I would personally enjoy the ability for you to come month by month and keep us posted. I know that I'm now committing you to a long process for a long time. But I think it would be helpful for us to keep ahead of things, to know where we're at, to know what our running total is. And we know that this will fluctuate and require a lot of work, but I'm happy, thank you, for maybe agreeing or maybe just not being at the meeting when you were picked. I'm not sure how it worked, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Kathy might not be at every single board meeting, but she will be coming to the study sessions, and she's been listening to the ones on Zoom, and she will be reporting back to the board, at least quarterly, so to keep us up to date if things change. Okay, next we have a discussion about premium pay requests from the ARPA funds. We've had several of these in the past weeks, and it's open for board discussion at this time. Stephanie, do you want to lead this part of the discussion?
So I want us to recognize that this is a difficult question. I don't think that this is an easy question for us to get at. I do think, though, that this question is tied to some of the things that we've heard earlier. This is something that I'll just be blunt, is something that I find myself torn on, because it's pretty clear to me that only people who worked in person are eligible, right? And so therefore, that means somebody who couldn't work in person because of health issues just is simply, as far as I can understand, just not eligible under this funding. It is also limited, and it seems as if maybe there's a little bit of disagreement on what that threshold is, but there is a threshold in terms of salary. So if you make above, and I believe the last memo we got had like $31 and change an hour, you're not eligible for this. But I think it's an important discussion to have because we did have people working on the front line. We did just receive a memo from the sheriff's office, and I just want to give everybody a forewarning that he also is going to ask a signing bonus request for some new employees that's much smaller, that would not be eligible through this, but would be another opportunity for us, and I fully intend to bring that before the board in August. It's a much smaller hit that the general fund would easily be able to absorb. But this could be an opportunity, and it's something I think every time I talk to Eric, if I run into him at the grocery store, if I talk to him on the street, if I see him in caucus, he continually says to me, we should be really seriously considering how we could use these ARPA funds to take care of the people in our sheriff's office who worked under really tight circumstances, and also the people across our county. As I said, the sheriff's office is maybe the most, we've heard testimony today, but I'm here to tell you that we also have situations in other offices, most notably in the coroner's office. And I don't know if a little bit of a bonus could kind of help folks hang on until we kind of get our salary study done and figure out what we're doing long-term. But we have that opportunity, and I think it's worthwhile to have that conversation. I don't want to, I mean, I have ideas, but I'd like to hear from folks, because I think just because something is hard to figure out doesn't mean that we just dismiss it. Not every day do we get additional money that we could hopefully use to, I mean, I think some of the folks that spoke earlier talked to the fact that, you know, when we lose county employees, we lose memory, we lose experience, and in some cases, especially in the sheriff's department, it's very expensive to retrain them, right? And it's just a simple fact that, I mean, in just multiple levels of we just aren't compensating our people to the market in our county. And that's something that's real. So we have an opportunity to try to address it. And I wanted it just as a discussion item before we moved to any sort of vote, because I think it is a conversation worth having, and that we would just sort of need to hash it out a little bit before. And I also want to recognize that if we do vote, it might be a lot of work for our financial staff, and to put that the actual appropriation together. And so the one request I've gotten from administrative staff is, please don't bring it to a vote unless we're serious about it. So we don't ask them, hey, do all this work with all these calculations, and then we're all like, no. You know what I mean? Like, if we're gonna do it, let's have a real conversation about it before we ask them to do that labor. And that's all I got.
Eric?
Thank you, Darlene. Yeah, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, Stephanie and I are those exciting people that shop on Friday nights, because I'm older now, and I don't do that stuff anymore. And I'm hungry sometimes, like right now. I have waxed poetic many times about this. I know it's unfortunate that the ARPA specifies in person. I think there's some people that were home, that had to be home, that would have happily been in if they could be. We heard from the correction officers tonight, and we have Dustin's memo in front of us. And I'm a firm believer, as a person who didn't get to work at home, and I know what I do is nothing like being a corrections officer or a sheriff deputy, but we've talked often and long that we have to do better by our law enforcement folks here at the county. We don't, but this salary study will be very important. But they had absolutely no choice. I had no choice in my job. I had to go. And for a while there, if you read the news and you saw what was happening, and as the wave was coming, and you had to go into work, if you remember in the beginning, we went in the grocery store and we ducked underneath the Cheerios when people came down the aisle and stuff. We were all terrified for a while that if you got looked at wrong, you'd be on a ventilator the next day. Despite all that, and as we learned to deal with it, our deputies and our corrections officers came to work every day. You heard that they're still at the first level, full mask, full PPE. I did that for a long time. I had to set up a COVID protocol where I work and make other people come back to work. We were the first shop and lab in the engineering college that was back open because we had to be, because we had a project that had a deadline we weren't given any break on. And so I know I felt pressured. I know the people that worked for me felt pressured. And I know that these folks felt pressured. They were here, they were doing their job. And this is a chance to show what we talk about all the time, and we heard the word in action tonight. This is action we can take. And in the ARPA funds, one of the things that's very, very clear, that I don't think Kathy's going to have any issue with clarifying for us, this is one of the things that's spelled out clear in black and white, premium pay for people who had to work through the pandemic in person. And I think we need to do that. I think that we're going to get requests like we have from Susan and from Dustin, and we need to discuss them. But I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. This is money that has been directed for that. among other things. This is one of the things that's very clear, and we really need to do right by these folks. I hope it helps with retention. I hope until we get the salary study back and we can pay these people well, that we can keep some of the folks that are on the fence, that if they pipeline, that on and do right by us. They have been. We need to do right by them.
Brad?
Thank you. I agree with you, Eric, especially your point regarding the memo from the sheriff and the testimony and public participation tonight. I cannot equate what they went through with what you went through at work and what I went through at work. So I'm more interested in entertaining these one-time bonuses per se, because at the end of the day, this doesn't fix the salary inequities that we may have. So please don't anyone think that this fixes it, because this is not a fix. But I believe that if every elected official or department came to us with a memo, very much like our sheriff, and we entertained each department separately, I believe each would benefit more. And I think that, well, I think we see from the public participation tonight that folks in the clerk's office don't go through the same thing that the folks at correctional do. And so I would like us to consider the job when we're considering the bonus.
So for those of you that are trying to remember what the county does in all its different departments, the 24/7 operations include the county jails, the county juvenile detention center, the coroner's office, the animal control office. Those are the four, mostly they're all related to law enforcement type things that are 24/7 operations. So the rest of the offices are more what I would consider office type folks. In terms of different work schedules and that kind of thing, different office spaces, the kind of work that they're doing.
The customers at animal control are, they can get away with eating their feces better than Dustin's customers.
Mr. Summers?
Yes, I would just like to make sure that the board, when considering premium pay, would take time to look at the idea of it being in the form of a stipend or a bonus rather than based on hourly pay. I think that would greatly simplify the process for staff. Thank you.
Mr. Patterson?
I guess I just want to acknowledge that, I mean, certainly the staff that has, when it comes to this pandemic, the most dangerous job that's never slowed down, their level of exposure never slowed down, is our corrections department. I mean, they live in a congregate living facility. We know that throughout this pandemic, whether it's a nursing home or a jail, those are places that are extremely vulnerable to the spread of disease. But to suggest that other county departments shouldn't be valued the same and deserve a bonus, particularly citing the clerk's office, I want to remind everybody the 2020 primary was on March 17th. That was less than 1 week after COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic. These are employees who were exposed to thousands of people coming in and out of their office. So I think we should acknowledge that many of our departments and people who are working in person were exposed to many things and should be appreciated.
Ms. Lakshan?
There we go. I just wanted to echo what Mr. Patterson said. I was working as an election judge for that 2020 primary, and that was, again, a week after, but it was about the same week, actually, as things shut down. I think my office closed the day after the primary. And the way that the clerk's office scrambled to make sure that we had protective equipment as judges, we had hand sanitizer, we had wipes, they made sure that we all felt safe working, and they rounded up so many election judges last minute too to replace elderly judges who no longer felt comfortable working. They did a fantastic job, and they have been through all elections and services that they've been offering since the pandemic began. So agreed. I think that we shouldn't treat any offices differently and exclude one over another while still acknowledging that there are some that definitely do a lot more difficult hands-on work.
Ms. Carter?
And I just think that if we stop making everything so personal, we'll get a lot of things accomplished as a board, okay? Everyone worked during COVID-19. We're scared because we had not endured this ever before. And so everyone should get some kind of compensation, not excluding certain departments. Thank you.
Ms. Ammons, is your hand up?
It wasn't, but I guess I can go on record to just say we know the difference is that one department is ran by a black person and the other one is ran by a white person. So I can just echo Ms. Carter and say that we should not exclude based on personal feelings. Thank you.
Ms. Furtado?
I think that the question about bonus compared to stipend is super important. And I've spent a lot of time reading the law, and I think that I agree that we would need to go with stipend because our HR system, or our, lack of HR system, I would very much doubt that any elected official could say with certainty whether somebody worked from home or in person on any given day. So, for example, that would just be really difficult, right? But I'm not done, sorry. But I do think that there's a way that we can sort of cover ourselves if indeed we need to have an hourly, because we're allowed to give up to $13 an hour. And so this is just how my brain has been working. We could say we're going to give $10 an hour, but for a very limited amount of time. So because our employees work 37.5 hours a week, if we said we were going to give $10 an hour for 2 weeks, not for the entire year, then that would be $750. If we said we were going to do it for a month, that would be $1,500. And then elected officials and department heads would simply have to say, I would think that they would know if somebody didn't work. Like if there was a sheriff's deputy or somebody from the clerk's office or somebody from the circuit clerk's office who didn't work at all, right, during the entire pandemic, they would know that. They might not know if Jim came in on Tuesday, but they would know if Jim didn't come in for 2020, right? And so that would be a way, and it would probably drop off a few people because there are some people who worked entirely from home, right? Yeah, so we could then, you know what I'm saying? It would be a round number that would be, and I would propose, and I would echo my colleagues, I would propose, again, we've heard from the sheriff's office, and they're having serious retention and problems, but it is not the only office, right? This is, again, a major issue that I've seen in the county, and this is an opportunity for us. So if we decided as a body to do either $750 or $1,500, right? And here, across the board, if we did it, it would be like $730,000 based on the calculation that Darlene's folks gave us. If we did across the board for everybody that is eligible within the funding parameters, right? And it would probably diminish a little bit after that. Although then I would say that we can revisit this, as far as I understand, in next year. And I do think that there is an argument to be made that the sheriff's office is still under protocols that our other offices aren't, right? And so if it was me, if I was just deciding this right now, I would pick the $1,500 bonus for our employees who kept this county running across the board for about a little bit less than 2%. And then specifically for the 24/7 operations, or if any operation that is still under phase 1 protocols, which I think is just the sheriff's office, but if it isn't, okay, sheriff's office and CDC, anybody that's under phase 1 protocols, I would then support doing it again for the next fiscal year. And that would get us, the sheriff's folks, to about $3,000, which is a little bit under, it's like, it's under what he asked for, but, and that to me, we would be thanking all of the employees for their work. We'd be acknowledging that people had all sorts of different stressors during COVID. There would be some people, and this is the part that kind of keeps me, up at night. We would need to figure that out in terms of the exact cutoff for salary and those folks that work from home. That's just unfortunate. And I'll go a step further. There are some people in the sheriff's department who are not eligible because their salaries are too high, right? However, I would agree that the work that they did, I would support us covering them for the bonus from the general fund in that special case. But that, again, that's just a proposal I want to throw out there, and maybe as a starting point, and this is, what I do at night.
Thank you, ma'am. I agree with a lot of what you said. One of the things in the beginning was how we would pay them. And I think one of the most important things that we need to do is check with the administrative office. Changing hourly dollar amounts and things like that, and then going back, that might be a little bit difficult and cumbersome. So maybe, I am definitely in agreement of the one-time like bonus or a stipend or whatever you want to call it. But to go back in and calculate hours could be another person's job in there. So that I would just double check with them and see what makes it the most easy, least amount of extra work for them. I don't believe anybody in here wants to leave any department out. It's just how do we find out what's equitable with what was going on and what is going on? And I'll just say that way. But I do agree a lot with what Stephanie said.
From the way Tammy and I have read this at this point, and we haven't talked with Kathy about this yet, but we're reading that you can do a one-time stipend. The rule about the hourly rate is that whatever you're paying people for premium pay cannot be less than they would normally make in the regular job on an hourly rate, an hourly basis. So because no one in our office has lost money over that time, whatever we would do, whether it would be a stipend or hourly or whatever, would be in addition to that. So it would be, I think we'd be fine. Mr. Paul.
I would like to see if we could do this later and maybe earmark it. The list of things that we need is vast, and the money, 40 sounds like a lot, but it's going to go by fast as well. If we can really get the things done infrastructure-wise that we can get done beforehand, I think that would be in our best interest. These people have jobs. I mean, they had jobs the whole time. Everyone here has been employed through COVID. There's people out there who have lost everything from this, and to pay people bonuses from money that's supposed to rescue the public is, I don't think, the best immediate use of it. I don't think any government official should get a bonus, and that money should go to the county.
Ms. Carter, you want to say something else?
I was just wondering about the new hire incentives. Would that be also with the stipend or not?
The new what?
The new hire, you said there's the staff
that's
is
not- that would
understaffed?
not be
That
our
would be
pers-
something
no.
separate?
Yeah, that would have to come from general fund.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mr. Humphrey.
I kind of do get what you're saying about, just the visibility of putting it off till later. Just the kind of the problem with that, I think, is we're kind of in a staffing crisis right now. And so part of doing this, part of having these stipends out there and is that we're trying to retain people in the sheriff's office. We're trying to retain people in the clerk's office. And if, in my industry right now, we're in the same boat as like the sheriff's office, where we're like, we're treading water, we're drowning. The importance of getting this money to the county workers who've earned it and who deserve it quicker rather than later is that, if you were to tell me, hey, we're going to give you a bonus in 6, 7, 8, 9 months, but my plan was to leave sooner, the bonus that you're telling me I'm going to get is not going to stop me from leaving. But I mean, you could make the argument that I would still leave, but I don't know. I just feel like this is important enough that we do need to take it seriously and try and do it sooner rather than later, just because hopefully it will help ameliorate some of these problems that we're having with staffing. Not that it's a long-term solution at all, but that's a discussion for many meetings to come.
So let me just add to the discussion to confuse things a little bit. Um, we've been working through our budget meetings with the departments. We're almost finished with all the different departments as far as budget is concerned. What I can tell you is that I will be bringing some recommendations for new staff to be added back into the county staffing. So far, we've got requests for 15 positions because every department has been understaffed since 2008. We brought this up before too. We just can't keep up anymore. The sheriff's office being one of those, the coroner's office being another one of those, JDC. There's lots of vacancies out there, and there's lots of positions that we just need to fill. We can't keep up with the volume. So I'm just mentioning that to the board. This is a larger issue, as Stephanie mentioned at the beginning, and we're not going to be able to resolve it all with this one thing, but this is one thing to consider. And hopefully the staffing study will help with some of that, but it won't be probably this budget year. And I will make some recommendations during the budget cycle as well that can help with some of it. But it's going to be a process. It's not going to get fixed overnight. And I would rather try to consider all the big picture stuff as well when you're making the smaller decisions so that we don't get off on a track we don't want to be on. Yeah. Ms. Lakshan.
I'm sorry, I don't have in front of me the worksheet. What percentage of county employees were under the threshold for receiving bonuses? Do we?
Sorry, I thought we were going to have those as handouts. So it's 291 employees for the general county employees are eligible based on the calculation that was put together for the memo that Darlene's staff put together. And 102 employees are not eligible. And I just want to be clear, at least a few of them, a handful of them would be in the sheriff's office because depending on where that threshold is, some of those folks. And then if we also include RPC employees, and that's, a discussion, I think that was one of the questions that I brought up at the last meeting, it'd be 291 employees, 231 employees, and 19 of them would be above the threshold. And I will say this, I have heard from several county staff that are above the threshold, and they have uniformly said, do not pay me that bonus. So I think that that's something to keep in mind, is like I haven't received any, I think that it makes sense to me to stay within the limits of the law, right? And the law also says you have to be working in person. And again, that's complicated. And to Jacob's point, this is another, I've heard this a lot from your caucus, and it's not something that I disagree with, is that there are other people in the county that are hurting, and how do we do, but we also, I think, have a responsibility to our employees and the people, right? And the people that we employ. I think that, and so I hear you, but I think that's a very, this is, like I said, this is a super complicated issue. And I don't know, I think no matter sort of what we decide, this is gonna be something that kind of gnaws at me.
So going back to Jacob's comment earlier, I did distribute also to the board the beginning idea for trying to come up with a decision-making process, because I do think the board is going to have to, rather than, again, take a decision by decision as somebody brings it to you, there needs to be a process by which you're making the decision so that it looks, somehow it ends up being a fair process about how you're deciding to do this. So the board might want to talk about that a little bit, and not tonight, but to think about how you're going to categorize, these things are qualified, these things aren't, but then after that, how are you going to decide? Because there still will be way more requests than you have money for. So I did give you a little model. It's just a beginning for conversation model. You can figure out if that would work, but that's the next thing I think that would be good to do before you get a lot more requests. Mr. Goss.
Thank you. I guess I'm listening to conversation. I'm a little undecided on what I think about it, but I think as a general compromise, I think we ought to take care of the 24/7 employees as fast as we can. And then decide, okay, as we allocate, certainly put that pool of folks that are also there in that next funding cycle and say, okay, how do we appropriately compensate those folks? Now, again, I don't know policy procedure, HR, how their system works, so I don't want to say that I've researched this idea. I just think that those who are on 24/7 and were exposed much more so than most of the rest of us, maybe all of us, they didn't have a choice. They didn't have screens. They didn't have the ability to call off and work from home. They were there to protect and serve, and not only protect us, but to protect the inmates. And the fact that we didn't have a jail with an outbreak says they protected those folks and tried to take care of them just the way they try to do every day. And I think that goes largely unnoticed. And Sheriff Harmon put it in there that they had no outbreaks. It's a big deal. I mean, it's a huge deal. There were small rural counties that had, 25 or 30 people in their jails, and they had outbreaks. And so we were one of the fortunate ones. I don't know what our average census was during that time, but I can almost guarantee it was over 150 or 160, and we still didn't have an outbreak. So kudos to them on that, but I think we need to get those folks taken care of ASAP. Thanks.
Okay, that might be it for tonight. Okay, next, applications for open appointments are in your packet as always. And I just want to add a real brief update for those of you that know that our jail had some problems in the last couple weeks when somebody ran into it. And so I just wanted to let you know, we have gotten estimates on cost repairs for the doors and the gate and those kind of things, the Sallyport. It'll run us about $100,000 for the repairs. There is a timing issue because some of the parts have to be actually made, custom made for things. But we are hoping in the next few weeks to get all that taken care of, and this jail is secure. So it's been secure all the time. There never was a breach into the jail. Do you want to speak to that at all, Dustin?
I'm going to ask my question.
Very, very briefly, because I know everybody wants to go home. There was quite a bit of damage at the satellite jail, but again, as Darlene said, there was no breach into the jail itself. And so I've been trying to make that abundantly clear with everybody I've spoken with. But Dana Brenner and I have started meeting on some extra precautions that we may be able to take. And of course, it all costs money, and so we're going to have to pick and choose what is cost effective and things. But whoever would have thought that somebody would have tried to run into the jail? I don't think that was ever thought of when it was built in 1996. So we will be doing some things, and we may be coming back to you with some recommendations and stuff like that, or we may be able to cover it in our own budget. I'm not sure quite yet, but we are looking for things. And in case you didn't catch it, Lieutenant Snyder, who was up here talking earlier, was actually the correctional officer that fired at the person and almost got ran over by the car. And so I'm not sure if everybody caught it or not. It was his first time up here speaking, and so I think he was a little bit nervous. But it just kind of shows how even our training has paid off, even though we don't do enough of it. Our training paid off even in that stressful situation that he never, ever thought would happen outside of the jail. So we should be proud of that at least.
Kyle has a question, I think.
What is the wait time we're looking at right now for the doors to come in?
So last I heard from Dana was about 8 weeks for the Sallyport doors.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.